So I'm Jennifer West. I'm the Dean of Engineering, and I'm so happy to welcome you all here this morning. I think we should have a really fun day and hopefully hear a lot of interesting perspectives, be able to meet women from many fields of engineering and lots of different career paths, and really hopefully get some good advice, get some new perspectives, get some new ideas on your futures. And I think it's also really special sometimes just to be able to come together with groups of people who are having common experiences, and so really hope that you enjoy the day together. So I do want to note we have one slight change in our agenda. So Sharon Wood, who is the provost at UT Austin, she caught influenza this week, so she was not able to travel. She will Zoom in. We shortened her talk. It was supposed to start at 1. We're going to start it at 1:15, both because it's Zoom and it's just harder to stay engaged with Zoom that long, but also she is still a bit under the weather and just in worrying about kind of lingering cough and all of that. Wanted to shorten it up a little bit. So that is kind of one slight change to the agenda, but I think it will work well. So I also hope you guys have all picked up your schedules for the speed mentoring event. We'll talk more about that later, but that should be an exciting part of the day. So our first speaker this morning is Jill Tietjen. We're really lucky to have her here today. So she's an alum of UVA and did applied math and electrical engineering when she was here. So she has worked in the electrical industry, electrical utility industry for a number of decades, 46 years, and still serves on the board of the Georgia Electrical Utility. She's also more recently in her career really focused on women's advocacy, and she's been a blogger for the Huffington Post on these topics. She's been an author. She's written 12 different books, including the book that we have free signed copies of for you out front, which is, I've loved reading this book. It's kind of the stories of women from a variety of fields who have been kind of Hall of Famers, and gives a lot of insights to kind of the grit and persistence needed for success. So I really hope you guys enjoy kind of reading those stories, that you find some time to go through it and get some inspiration. So I'm so happy to welcome Jill as our kickoff speaker.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's just really a pleasure for me to be here. And I'm going to talk to you today. My assigned topic is Hidden Figures in STEM. And what I'm going to talk about really is how I got through this whole process that you've heard about from UVA to where I am now. So I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. Some of you know where that is. My dad was an engineer at NASA, Langley. Hopefully, many of you have seen the movie Hidden Figures. Well, that's where that's set. Although, for those of you who are familiar with the geography of Virginia, they did film that in Middle Georgia, Piedmont, Georgia, actually. So that is a little annoying to me, having grown up in Hampton, Virginia, which is flat and watery. But the Octavia Spencer character is Dorothy Vaughan. That's her name. She started at NASA Langley in 1943. That's the same year that my dad started work at NASA Langley, when it was NACA. So I grew up the oldest of 4 children in a family where we were expected to go to college. And I was very fortunate that by the time that I was ready to go to college, the University of Virginia accepted women. So as undergraduate students, I'm in the 3rd class. And as we were talking about at breakfast this morning, I believe I'm one of the first 10 women to graduate from the engineering school. But I didn't start in engineering. I started in the college. as a math major. And halfway through my first semester, I realized I was in the first place. I met with the dean and I made all of the arrangements to transfer and majored in applied math with a minor in electrical. And then I met a man here while I was a student. He was a nuclear engineer. Duke Power Company really wanted him. We wanted to get married. That was, by the way, my first husband. And Duke Power then found a job for me. I'm a planner. I'm a system planner. And what that means and how I've spent my career actually is planning the generation system of electric utilities. What power plants are needed, when they're needed, what kind of fuel is required. I served as an expert witness before public utility commissions, documenting those things and verifying that there was a need for the facility, what kind of a facility it should be, and when it was required. Also, Duke Power, amazingly, recognized a number of different skills that I had and trained me as a speaker. So I used to go around and give talks on nuclear power and other kinds of topics. And importantly, at a card table, at a gymnasium at North Carolina State University, when I was doing on-campus recruiting for Duke Power, I found the Society of Women Engineers. SWE did not exist at UVA when I was here. You need 10 students to charter a section. We were the first 10, and we didn't know about SWE. So I found SWE. I got my MBA at night while I worked at Duke Power Company, and I found skiing. That's a North Carolina resort, and now I live in Colorado. So I call this icing because 5 minutes on the slope, 45 minutes in the lift line. And first husband and I moved to Colorado in 1981. And one of the first things I did when I got to Colorado is I called the SWE people there. And I said, I'm here and I want to become involved. And in 1987, my very dear friend, Alexis Swoboda, went to the SWE National, it was then called Convention. By the way, I highly recommend for any of you that have the opportunity to go to Houston in October for WE 2022. WE 22 is what they call it. And she went to the 1987 convention. She came back to Denver. She said, I've heard about this idea for an outreach program. It's an essay contest on great women in engineering and science. And I said, as I always said to Alexis, that is a great idea. And then I said, who are they? Because in 1987, I knew one historical woman in engineering or science anywhere in the world, and that was Marie Curie. See, you already know better than I do, but I didn't. In 1987, I knew one. Marie Curie, a Nobel laureate twice in physics and in chemistry. And what we found out when we started doing the research was that one of her daughters, Irene Joliet Curie, a hyphenated name when she married Frederick Joliet way before hyphenated names were common, won the Nobel Prize in 1935 for the discovery of artificial radioactivity. So there was the second one that we found without even trying. And what I didn't know at the time, but what I now say, is this quote from Thomas Edison. Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. And you better believe it was a lot of work. And then I was elected to the National Board of the Society of Women Engineers in 1988. That's a very funny story. There were 6 candidates for 3 positions. I was one of 6. I said, oh, fabulous. I'm one of 6. I'll never get elected. Ha! All right. So anyway, at my first board meeting, the president held up the nomination forms for the National Medal of Science and the National Medal of Technology, the U.S. equivalent to the Nobel Prize, awarded by the President of the United States. And she asked for a volunteer. 17 women in that room, and no one raised her hand. But I was equipped then, and some would argue still, with an auto volunteer arm. Any of you have that? Yes, you do. And I said, I'll do it. And in 1991, at Admiral Hopper's request, I was in the White House Rose Garden to accept her National Medal of Technology. And who was Admiral Hopper? Admiral Hopper developed the computer compiler. That's the computer software that allows us, humans, to speak English or French or German or Swahili or Chinese or Japanese to a computer. And that compiler then translates it into the zeros and ones that the computer understands. She also liked to take credit for finding the first computer bug. It was a moth stuck in the relay of the computer at Harvard during World War II while they were computing trajectories, missile trajectories for the war effort. She took it out of the relay with her compact, her tweezers, her mirror, taped it into the logbook, and I believe that today it's at the Smithsonian. She developed the first English-based computer language. It was called Flowmatic. She was instrumental in the development of the computer language COBOL. An amazing woman, and I didn't tell you when I was at the White House Rose Garden, even though I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, that was the hottest day of my whole life. And in January of '96, I was at the Bath Iron Works in Bath, Maine, for the launching of the destroyer Hopper, a Navy ship, on the coldest day of my whole life. Admiral Hopper was my first successful nominee to the National Women's Hall of Fame. This is actually Virginia Apgar and Lillian Muller-Gilbreth, who were both inducted. I nominated them in '95. I think my total is now about 35 into the National Women's Hall of Fame, and in 2015, I served as CEO. And now I want to talk to you about all of the women, or not all of them, some of the women that we discovered in researching these historical women in engineering and science, and then other women that were discovered in the course of writing Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, which is one of my books. And I'm going to rip through this because I want to allow time for questions at the end, and I want just to give you a flavor of these women. And I also want to have some time to talk about over, under, around, and through how Hall of Famers surmount obstacles. So this is a flavor. This is just a flavor. 1744, Eliza Lucas Pinckney, who was running 3 plantations on behalf of her father near Charleston, South Carolina, commercialized indigo. So I'm not wearing any blue today, but whoever is wearing blue, indigo is used for that. And if you're interested in more information on Eliza Lucas Pinckney, there's a very good book called The Indigo Girl by Natasha Boyd. What I will tell you is this woman raised 2 sons, one of whom signed the Constitution, one of whom was the governor of South Carolina. And when she died, George Washington asked to be a pallbearer at her funeral, a woman who commercialized indigo production. Margaret Mitchell, an astronomer who got the gold medal from the King of Denmark in 1847 for the discovery of a comet with a telescope. She became the first woman who was elected to the American Academy of Sciences, 1848. In 1850, the first woman elected to the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. She became a professor at Vassar, one of the 2 female professors at Vassar College when it was established, and ran their observatory and trained generations of astronomers. Margaret Knight perfected the machine that folds square-bottom paper bags, the grocery bag. She was an itinerant inventor. She invented a dress and skirt shield, a clasp for holding robes. She has a series of patents for shoe cutting machines and a series of patents for rotary engines and motors. A man actually disputed the fact that the idea for the paper bag machine was hers, and she had to go to a hearing before the Commissioner of Patents and demonstrate her knowledge and her expertise and that it was, in fact, her idea. Martha Costen invented a flare that was actually used between the Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack. I told you I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. There's a sign right near where I grew up that was where the Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack took place, in the Hampton Roads, the body of water called the Hampton Roads. And her signal flare was used in that battle, and she worked for many years. 1871 was when she got the patent. The Navy bought the rights to use that from her for that signal flare for $20,000 in the 1870s, about the equivalent of $375,000 today. Henretta Swallow Richards, the first woman admitted to MIT, although she was admitted as the Swallow experiment, that was before she was married, without tuition, so that the trustees and the president and the students, when asked, could say no. There were no girls enrolled, no women enrolled. A woman who is credited as a pioneer in the field of sanitary engineering, the founder of the field of ecology. She pioneered in home economics. She took 100,000 water samples in Massachusetts and produced the first water quality standards in the US and the first water purity tables. This is actually one of her charts that she developed. She was really a go-getter. Her sister-in-law called her Encyclopedia. 3 patents. The one on the left, one of the first patents from an African-American woman in 1885. Sarah Good got a patent for her folding cabinet bed, which was a desk, and when not in use as what we would call a hideaway, and when not in use as a hideaway could be a desk. In the middle, a woman, 1886, Josephine Cochran, the dishwasher. In 1887, Harriet Strong got one of her patents in water conservation and water irrigation. She helped make California the breadbasket that it is for us. Almost all of our produce that we get in Colorado is from California that she helped make possible. When I give a talk to younger students, and many students, I actually say, okay, when you see your Thanksgiving turkey this year, you are to say, thank you, Mary Engel Pennington, the woman who developed the standards for refrigerated railroad cars so that you could have these kinds of foods transported to you. There's a very famous story that I'm going to take the time to tell you. There was a railroad executive, and he saw that there was a woman sitting outside of the door, and he told his assistant to get rid of that woman because he was expecting the eminent refrigeration expert, Dr. M. E. Pennington. I can tell you that when I was a student here, and when I graduated, we still used initials. For many, many years, women could not use their names. They had to use initials because otherwise they wouldn't be taken seriously. All right, I mentioned Lillian Muller Gilbreth. For any of you who have seen the original movie, not any of the subsequent movies, Cheaper by the Dozen, based on Lillian and Frank Gilbreth, who decided before they were married that they were going to have 12 children to test their theories of industrial engineering. So what I will say briefly, the first lady of engineering, the first scholarship in SWE that was established is the Lillian Muller Gilbreth Scholarship, a woman who was a huge supporter of women in engineering. When you have surgery, you're not going to hear this, but if the doctor says nurse, scalpel, that's the Gilbreths. When you put your foot on a trash can and with a foot pedal and it opens the lid, that's the Gilbreths. She was very intrigued and encouraged, it's not a strong enough word, washing machine manufacturers. Not only were they going to pump water into the washing machine, it was also going to get pumped out. So the next time you do a load of wash, thank you, Lillian, when you open your refrigerator door and you see the egg tray and the butter dish and those drawers, that's Lillian Gilbreth. Ruth Patrick, who worked on water quality, she actually developed the diatometer, one of the means that is used today to assess the level of water pollution. And when scientists talk about biodiversity as a key indicator of ecosystem health, they call it the Patrick Principle. Catherine Blodgett, who developed non-reflective glass. So that's the glass on this monitor, on this laptop, on your smartphone. 1938, one of the first uses of that non-reflective glass was for the movie lenses that were used in the cameras to film Gone with the Wind. Shang Wu, a nuclear physicist who proved the theory of the conservation of parity. You know how your left arm and your right arm aren't the same length, your right feet? Well, at one point it was thought that in nature, the left and the right were totally symmetrical. But then there was a theory that that was not true, and she proved it. The two men that developed the theory got the Nobel Prize. The Curie cycle. Okay. Gertie Curie, another Nobel laureate in 1947 with her husband for their discovery of the course of the catalytic conversion of glycogen. I tell younger students, because I want them to understand, that not all engineers love sciences. I hate chemistry. I don't even like looking at that. But basically, the work that they did, that the Curies did, is how our bodies convert food into substances that can be used in the body. All right, and not all of you agree with me, but you see that picture there on the left? That's a transmission line, and I think it's beautiful. But anyway, and it's how we get this. So, and that's what I've spent my career doing. Edith Clark, who wanted to be an engineer, the first woman to graduate with a master's degree in electrical engineering from MIT, but no company would hire her because it didn't have a slot for a woman engineer. Eventually, she did actually become a woman engineer at General Electric. She has a patent for a graphical calculator, has been inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, and was the first female professor of electrical engineering in the country, and that was at the University of Texas at Austin. Rachel Fuller Brown and Elizabeth Lee Hazen developed the first antifungal antibiotic. When the soldiers came back from World War II with fungus infections, they wanted to make sure that there was a drug to treat them, and they found it. Annie Djuanica, the first woman elected to the Navajo Tribal Council in the early 1950s. With her knowledge of English and Navajo, she helped eradicate tuberculosis from the reservation and significantly reduce infant mortality, the first Native American to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Rachel Carson, whose 1962 book, Silent Spring, led to Earth Day in 1970 and the banning of the pesticide DDT. Stephanie Kwolek, whose invention of Kevlar is now used in more than 200 products, including the tires, probably, that we drove on here today, and armor for our service people. I told you about Admiral Hopper and her National Medal of Technology. It's now called the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. And this was my second successful nominee, whose name was Yvonne Brill. Yvonne Brill invented the hydrazine resistor jet propulsion engine, which is used on all the communication satellites aloft. And I was in the East Room for this presentation when Barack Obama gave Yvonne Brill her National Medal of Technology and Innovation, a woman who I was pleased to support because of her active nomination. We now believe more than 100 women that she nominated for awards. Flossie Wong Stahl, the first scientist to clone the HIV. Mae Jemison, who was a chemical engineer undergraduate and then became a medical doctor and the first African-American woman in space when she flew aboard the space shuttle Endeavour in 1992. Gertrude Elion, who without a PhD invented an amazing series of drugs, including the first effective childhood leukemia drug, the first the immunosuppressant drug, developed the techniques that led to the development of AZT to treat AIDS. And when I was at the White House to receive Admiral Hopper's National Medal of Technology, there was this lovely grandmotherly looking woman standing over in the corner by herself. And I went over to speak with her, and that was Gertrude Elion. Sheila Whitnall, an aeronautical engineer who became Secretary of the Air Force, the first woman in 1993. When she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame, she said that growing up herding horses on a ranch in California was good training for leading the faculty. Ellen Ochoa, an electrical engineer and the first female Hispanic astronaut in space. Ellen and I actually worked together last year on a nomination for a woman who, yes, is in this presentation in a minute. Helen Greiner, who helped found iRobot Corporation, and iRobots have been used from war zones in the Middle East to the surface of Mars to unexplored corners of Egypt's Great Pyramid. This is Christina Johnson, who is now the president of The Ohio State University. She developed RealD 3D, for which she's been inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. I did that nomination, and she was the one that Ellen Ochoa and I are working on for a nomination, which we won't know for a while if it's successful for the National Medal of Technology. So all of this work has led to series of books. And one of the things, remember that quote from Thomas Edison? Who knew, not me, that starting an essay contest in 1987 was going to lead to where I am now. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to take advantage of opportunities. Actually, that's another one of my books, which is, okay, that's her story, a timeline of the women who changed America. More than 850 women in US history from 1587 to 2011. And then the middle one in here, that's part of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers Women in Engineering series. I'm book 9, recognizing and taking advantage of opportunities, because that's really how I see what's happened in my life. Saying yes to opportunities as they came along. And then the Springer Women in Engineering and Science series, which is on the far right, one of the books that's in that series. I'm the series editor for that. And any faculty members that are here, I would like to talk to you about that. So my friend Barbara Bridges, when I was talking to her in 2016 and telling her I thought there were going to be more books in the Her Story series and that I was working on Her Story Africa. I'm actually under contract right now. Her Story Kenya is written, and I'm under contract to a publisher in Nairobi, Kenya for that book. And hopefully that will be published sometime soon, although things move a little slowly. But anyway, in 2016, Barbara said to me, "Oh, you don't want to write Her Story Africa. Let's do women in the movies." And so Hollywood, Her Story, an illustrated history of women in the movies. And then the book that you can get a copy of today, I want to talk about that for a few minutes before opening it up to questions. In 2020, during a virtual happy hour, a woman who had been on the board of directors of the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame said, "Why don't you write a book about how women in the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame overcame the obstacles in their lives?" So I contacted my friend, Ellie Greenberg, who is a friend, a mentor, and a sponsor. I've known Ellie, or I knew Ellie since 1991. And I said, "Ellie, I think we should write this book." And so in June of 2020, socially distanced on her back patio, we sat down and started thinking about this book. And I said to Ellie, what happens to you, Ellie, when you have a problem or an obstacle or a challenge in your life? And she just went like this. And that's when I knew we could write this book. And so we decided to interview as many women as we could in the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. And they're not only in the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. Many of them are in the National Women's Hall of Fame. Many of them are in halls of fame around the world. Developed a series of questions and did interviews, primarily Zoom, but sometimes phone. And then we had all of this information. And Ellie said, well, what are we going to do with it? And I get ideas primarily on the treadmill and in the shower. And so I think it was in the shower one day, and I went, stories. We're going to write stories. 50 stories of women who overcame pretty significant obstacles in their lives, from incest to murder-suicide, to death of a parent, to divorce, to breast cancer, to all of the issues that face us in our lives. And we found a publisher. I'm delighted to say that Fulcrum is an amazing partner. And although the book will not be released officially until May 3rd, they're already talking about a second printing. So it's doing really very well. This quote is the quote that Charlotte Waisman, my co-author, and I used to start the introduction of our book, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And to me, that means that it only takes one person to change the world. And everyone in this room can be that one person. So this is the website for Over, Under, Around, and Through, where you can order additional copies, see the video that I've done on 5 things you can do to become more resilient in turbulent times, and other information on the book. And I did it, so there's time for questions. And I will tell you that I'm a trained expert witness. So I've been trained for questions, and actually the Q&A is my favorite part. So hopefully you will have some questions, and there's a microphone here so that the live streaming people can hear you when you ask a question. So we have a question, okay.
It's really fun to see that many young students in the room. When I did my PhD, there would have been 2. So this is really great to see, and quite exciting for me.
So since you're the trained expert, I'll ask you a question. So one of the things I think about when I think about obstacles, right? And for those of you in the room that don't know who I am, I work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things I think about is so much of what we do is reactive, right? Like we're constantly reacting to the obstacles. And many of the obstacles I see others face, because my job is to create opportunity for others, right? And many of the obstacles I see in my own life are things that maybe we didn't expect, or that are systemic in some way, right? Like barriers that kind of create these walls that we can't get through. And we're reactive, right? Like we see the obstacle, okay, we react, we fix that problem, but not in any systemic way, right? Like not in any proactive or preventative way from happening it, right? Like sometimes my job feels like I'm just bandaging situations and I can't do more visionary kind of change, right? When it comes to the obstacles I'm seeing. How do you recommend we move, or we take what we're learning, I guess, and create more pathways? Because you've studied all the women who've created pathways, right? Like how do we take what we're learning and the obstacles we're seeing and create pathways so other people don't hit those obstacles?
Oh my goodness, that is such a good question. And it's something that I think about all the time. I'm going to answer it in 2 different ways. The first one is let's call it maybe the frustration. I've been working through the Society of Women Engineers since I joined in 1979 to increase the number and percentages of women in the engineering fields. And for those of you who know the statistics, basically we made progress through about 1985, and for better or for worse, we're kind of sort of still there. And that's 30 years ago. And so there's something else that's providing those barriers, and that's issues in society. I mentioned at breakfast with you this morning that I'm reading a book that I just started yesterday, so it doesn't have all the answers yet, but Cassandra Speaks is the name of the book. And I'm hoping that there's information and lessons there. That the problems that we're battling go all the way back to Adam and Eve. And so when you think about how hard it is to make progress there, we have to actually address some of those basic and fundamental issues. And I've already forgotten the second thing I was going to say. So, but I know what I was going to say. So we have to figure out how to treat and how to deal with society in the whole. With the systemic issues that we're facing. And then the other thing that I will say is that the way the book is structured, over, under, around, and through, is that it looks at the skills that people used to overcome the obstacles in their lives. And that's mental intelligence, emotional intelligence, social support, moral compass and spirituality, determination, perseverance, persistence, creativity, optimism, resilience, action orientation, and passion. See, I got them. And I think that everyone can cultivate those skills. There are things that happen in our lives for which many things like this, you cannot predict. You can only prepare. And you can only prepare yourself. And I have a chapter in the book, and my story is in the book, and it's titled, "What's the Worst Thing That Can Happen?" or something very similar to that. And that story is that 9 months after my first husband and I got married, actually at Pavilion 8 on the lawn, his parents died in a murder-suicide. He had a 14-year-old brother and an 18-year-old brother, and they came to live with us. And we got them through high school, and we got them through college, and we got the younger one through law school. And we were 22. So how do you deal with that, and how do you function? And so my philosophy in life is thinking about, in my job, it was called scenario planning. Scenario planning. This might happen, or this might happen, or this might happen, or this might happen, or this might happen. And this might be the worst thing, but you have all of these things. That's how utilities plan for power plants for the future, by doing scenario planning. And you can do the same thing. You can look at scenario planning. If this happens, what will I do? If this happens, what will I do? If this happens, what will I do? And prepare using those skills and understanding that everyone, absolutely everyone, faces obstacles in their lives. It's not something that is just happening only to you. It happens to everyone. So I know there's a mic somewhere else. Yes.
Hi, I really liked the quote, "You had opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work." I don't feel good at the end of the day unless I feel like I can reflect back on my day and say I got something done. Right now I'm a lecturer here, and I feel like I'm really often pulled into paying lip service and kind of propped up as a token or as a role model. And as a result, I spend all my time talking and mentoring, and I don't actually get to get down and get the work done, and do my engineering and my math, which is what I love. How can you balance those two?
It's called boundary setting, and I'm very bad at it. It's boundary setting, and I'm very bad at that. Actually, when my mother died in 2004, I had to say no to everything for 4 months because I was the executor and she was a compulsive hoarder and we had to clean out the house. And so what I say is the world didn't fall apart in those 4 months because I said no to everything that anybody asked me to do. And it became easier after that to be able to say no. In fact, when I was national president of SWE, there's a board fun night, which is basically a roast at the end of your term. And one of the gifts that I was given, which I still have, I believe, somewhere, was like a little tank top that when you read it upside down, because that's how you wear it, upside down it says no, 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 just say no all over it. And so but I mean, one of the reasons I'm here is because the mentoring and the role modeling feeds my soul. And I think it's very important for me to give back. And so that's the balance that you have to have. How do you set those priorities and where do you spend the time when the mentoring and the role modeling feeds your soul, as does your other work? And so I don't have the answer for you, but I can tell you that it's a matter of boundaries and priority setting. So I think we have time for only one more question. I'm sorry, but I'll be here all day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your work to elevate the accomplishments of so many women. I have a question for you. Have you ever encountered reluctance to be recognized? And if so, where do you suppose that comes from?
Have I ever had someone? My goodness! Yeah, absolutely, positive. It's a kind of a absolutely positively. And one example, I was doing a book signing in upstate New York somewhere years ago, and I was going to write on this woman's book, Another Remarkable Woman, and she said to me, "You can't write that." And I was actually really surprised. And then Admiral Hopper, when I was nominating her for the National Medal of Technology, and that took me 2 years to do that, she said, "Oh, I'm not helping you." I mean, I actually called her and talked to her. She was alive. She died after she got the medal. And I'm not helping you. And so, yes, there are many people who are very reluctant. And I just think that's the wrong answer. So I just don't accept it. So, all righty. Well, thank you very much. I'll be here all day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.